Hey everybody. It's day 7, almost day 8. Because it is currently 10:04 p.m. and we're gonna read for 30 minutes. Better late than never. That's all I can say. Okay, I thought we wasn't gonna make it today, but we did. So thank God. Crazy morning. I had a crazy morning and well no, I just had work like early today and usually when I work at 5:45 in the morning, I crash for the whole day because who is up at that time? Hello. Anyway, we are ready to go. Chapter 14, page 76. The river was better than 100 yards across at the point in 1960. I've been back at I've been back to look at it since then and found it had narrowed up quite a bit during the years between. They're always fooling with the river, trying to make it work better for the mills, and they've put in so many dams that it's pretty well tamed. But in those days, there were only 3 dams in the whole length of the river as it ran across New Hampshire and half of Maine. The castle was almost free back then, and every third spring it would overflow its banks and cover Route 136 in either Harlow or Danvers Junction or both. Now at the end of the driest summer western Maine had seen since the Depression, it was still abroad. From where we stood on the Castle Rock side, the bulking forest on the Harlow side looked like a different country altogether. The pines and spruces over there were bluish, no, bluish in the heat haze of afternoon. The rails went across the water 50 feet up, supported by an underpinning of tarred wooden support posts, and crisscrossing beams. The water was so shallow you could look down and see the tops of the cement plugs which had been planted feet deep in the riverbed to hold up the trestle. The trestle itself was pretty chintzy. What are these words? Like, I don't even understand what half of these words mean. The rails ran over a long, narrow wooden platform of 6x4s. There was a 4-inch gap between each pair of these beams where you could look all the way down into the water. On the sides, there was no more than 18 inches between the rail and the edge of the terrestrial. Terrestrial. If a train came, it was maybe enough room to avoid getting plastered, but the wind generated by a high-balling fright would surely sweep you off to fall to a certain death against the rocks just below the surface of the shallow running water. Looking at the trestle, we felt fear started to crawl around in our bellies, and mixing uneasily with fear was the excitement of a boss dare, a really big one. Something you could brag on for weeks after you got home. If you got home. If you got home. That queer light was creeping back into Teddy's eyes, and I thought he wasn't seeing the GS and WM train trestle at all. But a long sandy beach, 1,000 LSTs aground in foaming waves, 10,000 GIs charging up the sand, combat boots digging. They were leaping rolls of barbed wire, tossing grenades at pillboxes, overrunning machine gun nests. We were standing beside the tracks where the cinders sloped away toward the river's cut, the place where the embankment stopped and the trestle began. Looking down, I could see where the slope started to get steep. The cinders gave way to scraggly, tough-looking bushes and slabs of gray rock. Further down, there were a few stunted firs with exposed roots, writhing their way out of fissures in in the plates of rock. They seemed to be looking down at their own miserable reflections in the running water. At this point, the Castle Rock actually looked fairly clean at Castle Rock. It was just entering Maine's textile mill belt, but there was no fish jumping out there. Although the river was clear enough to see bottom, you had to go another 10 miles upstream and towards New Hemisphere before you could see any fish in the castle. There were no fish, and along the edge of the river you could see dirty collars of foam around some of the rocks. The foam was the color of old ivory. The river's smell was not particularly pleasant either. It smelled like laundry hamper full of mildewy towels. Dragonflies stitched at the surface of the water and laid their eggs with impunity. There were no trout to eat them. Hell, there wasn't even shiners. Man, Chris said softly. Come on, Teddy said in that brisk, arrogant way. Let's go. He was already edging his way out, walking on the 6x4s between shining rails. Say, Vern said uneasily, any of you guys know when the next train's due? We all shrugged. I said, there's the Route 136 bridge. Hey, come on, give me a break, Teddy cried. That means walking 5 miles down the river on this side and then 5 miles back up on the other side. It'll take us until dark. If we use the trestle, we can get to the same place in 10 minutes. But if a train comes, there's nowheres to go, Vern said. He wasn't looking at Teddy. He was looking down at the fast, bland river. Frick, there isn't, Teddy said indi- indignantly. Indignantly. I really can't. I'm really struggling with pronouncing words. Like, what is wrong with me? He swung over the edge and held one of the wooden supports between the rails. He hadn't gone out very far. His sneakers were almost touching the ground, but the thought of doing that same thing above the middle of the river with a 50-foot drop beneath and a train bellowing just over my head, a train that would have probably be dropped some nice hot sparks into my hair down the back of my neck. None of that actually made me feel like queen for a day. See how easy it is, Teddy said. He dropped to the embankment, dusting his hands, and climbed back beside us. You telling me you gonna hang on that way if there's 200 car freight? Chris asked. Just sort of hang there by your hands for 5 or 10 minutes. You chicken? Teddy shouted. No, just asking what you'd do, Chris said, grinning. Peace, man. Go around if you want to, Teddy brayed. Who gives a break? I'll wait for you. I'll take a nap. One train already went by, I said reluctantly, and probably isn't any more than one. 2 trains a day that go through Harlow. Look at this. I kicked the weeds growing up through the railroad ties with one sneaker. There was no weeds growing between the tracks which ran between Castle Rock and Lewiston. There, see? Teddy triumphant. What do these words mean? Like, I don't even know. Triumph. Font. Oh my god, it's only been 8 minutes. I'm already done. Like, I just don't want to read this anymore. But still, there's a chance, I added. Yeah, Chris said. He was looking at only at me, his eyes sparkling. Dare you, a chance. Dares go first. Okay, Chris said. He wanted his gaze to take in Teddy and Vern. Any pussies here? No, Teddy shouted. Vern cleared his throat, cleared it again, and said no in a very small voice. He smiled a weak, sick smile. Okay. Sorry, y'all. Oh my god, I don't even have water. Okay, sorry. Okay, Chris said, but we hesitated for a moment, even Teddy, looking warily up and down the tracks. I knelt down and took one of the steel rails firmly in my hand. Never minding what? Never minding that it was almost hot enough to blister the skin. The rail was mute. Okay, I said, and as I said it, some guy pole vaulted in my stomach. He dug his pole all the way into my balls, it felt like. and ended up sitting aside my heart. We went out onto the trestle single file. Chris first, then Teddy, then Vern, and me playing tail and Charlie because I was the one who said dares go first. We walked on the platform, crossed these between rails, and you have to look at your feet whether you were scared of heights or not. A misstep, and you could go down to your crotch, probably with a broken ankle to pay. The embankment dropped away beneath me, and every step further out seemed to seal our decisions more firmly and to make it feel more suicidally stupid. I stopped to look up when I saw the rocks giving away to water beneath me. Chris and Teddy were a long way ahead, almost out over the middle, and Vern was tottering slowly along behind them, peering studiously down at his feet. He looked like an old lady trying out stills with his head poking downwards, his back hunched, his arms held out for balance. I looked over my shoulder. Too far, man. I had to keep going now, and not only because a train might come. If I went back, I'd be a pussy for life. So I got walking again. After looking down at that endless series of crosties for a while, uh, with a glimpse of running water between each pair, I started to feel dizzy and disoriented. Each time I brought my foot down, part of my brain assured it was going to plunge through into space, even though I could see it was not. I became acutely aware of all the noises inside me and outside me, like some crazy orchestra tuning up to play. The steady thump of my heart, the blood beat in my ears like a drum being played with brushes, the creak of sinews, sinews, like the strings of violin that have been tuned radically upward, the steady hiss of the river, the hot hum of a locust digging into the tight bark, and the monotonous cry of a chickadee, and somewhere far away a barking dog. Chopper, maybe. The the mildew smell of Castle Rock was strong in my nose. The long muscles in my thighs were trembling. I kept thinking how much safer it would be, probably faster as well, if I just got down on my hands and knees, and scuttered along that way. But if I wouldn't do that, none of us would. If if the Saturday matinee movies down to the gem had taught us anything, it was that only losers crawl. It was one of the central tenets of the gospel according to Hollywood. Good guys walk firmly upright, and if you're sinews, what does that word mean? Sinews are creaking like overtime violin strings because of the adrenaline rush going on in your body, and if the long muscles in your thighs are trembling for the same reason, why, so be it. I had to stop in the middle of the trestle and look up at the sky for a while. That dizzy feeling had been worse. I saw phantom cross ties. They seemed to float right in front of my nose. They had faded out and I began to feel okay again. I looked ahead and I had almost caught up with Vern, who was slow poking along the worse than ever. Chris and Ted were almost all the way across. And although I've seen written, and I'll, well, and although I've since written 7 books about people who can do exotic things read minds and recognate the future. That was when I had my first and last psychic flash. I'm sure that's what it was. How else to explain it? I squatted and made a fist around the rail on my left. It thrummed in my hand. It was thrumming so hard that it was like gripping a bundle of deadly metallic snakes. You've heard it said his bowels turned to water. I know what that phrase means, exactly what it means. It may be the most accurate cliche ever coined. I've been scared since, badly scared, but I've never been as scared as I was in that moment, holding that hot live rail. It seemed that for a moment all my work below throat level just went limp and lay there in an internal faint. A thin stream of urine ran listlessly down the inside of one thigh. My mouth opened. Oh my god. I didn't open it. It opened by itself. The jaw dropped like a trap door from which the hinge pins had suddenly been removed. My tongue was plastered suffocatingly against the roof of my mouth. All my muscles were locked. That was the worst. My works went limp, but my muscles were in a kind of dreadful lock bolt, and I couldn't move at all. It was only for a moment, but in the subjective time stream it seemed forever. All sensory input became intensified, as if some power surge had occurred in the electrical flow of my brain, cranking everything up from 110 volts to 22. I could hear a plane passing in the sky somewhere near and had time to wish I was on it, just sitting in a window seat with a Coke in my hand and gazing idly down at the shining line of a river whose name I did not know. I could see every little splinter and gog in the tarred crosty I was squatting on. And out of the corner of my eye, I could see the rail itself with my hand still clutched around it, glittering insanely. The vibration from that rail sank so deeply into my hand that when I took it away, it still vibrated, the nerve endings kicking each other over and over again, tingling the way a hand or foot tingles when it had been asleep and it's starting to wake up. I could taste my saliva, suddenly all electric, sour, and thickening to curds along my gums. And worst, somehow, most horribly of all, I couldn't hear the train yet, and could not know if it was rushing at me from ahead or behind, or how close it was. It was invisible. It was unannounced, except for that shaking rail. There was only that to advertise its imminent arrival. An image of Ray Brower dreadfully mangled and thrown into a ditch somewhere like a ripped open laundry bag reeled before my eyes. We would join him, or at least Vern and I would, or at least I would. Damn, crazy line. We had invited ourselves to our own funerals. The last thought broke the paralysis, and I shot to my feet. I probably would have looked like a jack in the box to anyone watching, but to myself I felt like a boy in underwear, slow motion, shooting up not through 5 feet of air, but rather up through 500 feet of water, moving slowly, moving with a dreadful languidness as the water parted grudgingly. But at last I did break the surface. I screamed, "Train!" The last of the paralysis fell from me and I began to run. Vern's head jerked back over his shoulder. The surprise that distorted his face was almost comically exaggerated, written as large as the letters in a Dick and Jane primer. He saw me break into my clumsy, shambling run, dancing from one horribly high crossy to the next, and knew I wasn't joking. He began to run himself. Far ahead, I could see Cress stepping off of the ties and onto the solid, safe embankment, and I hated him with a sun-bright green hate as juicy and as bitter as the sap in an April leaf. He was safe. That was safe. I watched him drop to his knees and grab a rail. my foot left almost slipping into the yaw beneath me. I flailed into my arms, my eyes as hot as ball bearing in some runaway piece of machinery, got my balance, and ran on. Now I was right behind Vern. We were past the halfway point, and for the first time I heard the train. It was coming from behind us, coming from the Castle Rock side of the river. It was a slow rumbling noise that began to rise slightly and sort itself into the diesel thrum of the engine and the higher, more sinister sound of big grooved wheels turning heavily on the rails. Aw, shoot, Vern screamed. Run, you pussy, I yelled and thumped him on the back. I can't. I'll fall. Run faster. Shoot. But he ran faster, a shambling scarecrow with a bare sunburnt back, and the collar of his shirt swinging and dangling below his butt. I could see the sweat standing out on his peeling shoulder blades and standing out in the perfect little beads. I could see the fine down on the nape of his neck. His muscle clutched and loosened, clenched and loosened, clenched and loosened. His spine stood out in a series of knobs, each knob casting its own crescent-shaped shadow. I could see that these knobs grew closer together as they approached his neck. He was still holding his bedroll, and I was still holding mine. Vern's feet thudded on the crosties. He almost missed one, lunging forward with his arms out, and I whacked him on the back again to keep him going. Gordy, I can't. Oh, shoot! Run faster! Run faster, dick face! I below, and was I enjoying this? Yeah, in some peculiar self-destructive way that I have experienced since only when completely and utterly drunk I was. I was driving Vern Tessio like a drover getting a particularly fine cow to market. And maybe he was enjoying his own fear in that same way, bawling like that same cow, hollering and sweating, his rib cage rising and falling like the bellows of a blacksmith on a speed trip, clumsily skipping his footing, lurking ahead, or lurching ahead. The train was very loud now, its engine deepening to a steady rumble. Its whistle sounded as if it crossed the junction point where we had paused to chuck cinders at the rail flag. I had forgotten my hellhound, like it or not. I kept waiting for the trestle to start shaking under my feet. When that happened, it would go right behind us. Go faster, Vern! Faster! Oh God, Gordy. Oh God, Gordy. Oh God. Ah, shoot. The fright's electric horn suddenly spanked the air into 100 pieces with one long, loud blast, making everything you saw in a movie or a comic book, or one of your own daydreams fly apart, letting you know what both the heroes and cowards really heard when death flew at them. Wonk, wonk. And then Chris was below us and to the right, and Teddy was behind him, his glasses flashing back arcs of sunlight, and they were both mouthing a single word, and the word was jump. But the train had sucked all the blood out of the word, leaving only its shape in their mouths. The trestle began to shake as the train charged across it. We jumped. Vern landed full length in the dust and the cinders, and I landed right beside him, almost on top of him. I never did see that train, nor did I know it was its engineer, or if its engineer saw us. When I mentioned the possibility that hadn't seen us to Chris a couple of years later, he said, "They don't blow the horn like that. Awesome. Just for Chuck, Squirty." But he could have. He could have been blowing it just for the hell of it, I suppose. Right then, such fine points didn't much didn't much matter. I clapped my hands over my ears and dug my face into the hot dirt as the fright went by, metal squalling against metal, the air buffeting us. I had no urge to look at it. It was a long fright, but I never looked at all. But it had passed completely. I felt a warm hand on my neck and knew it was crisp. When it was gone, when I was sure it was gone, I raised my head like a soldier coming out of his foxhole at the end of a long day. Artillery barrage. Vern was still plastered into the dirt, shivering. Chris was sitting cross-legged between us, one hand on Vern's sweaty neck and the other on mine. When Vern finally sat up, shaking all over, licking his lips compulsively, Chris said, "What you guys think if we drink those cokes? Could anyone use one besides me?" We all thought we could use one. I mean, who doesn't love a good coke after getting hit by a freaking train? We got like this chapter is way too long for 4 minutes. I'm sorry, y'all. I think we're just gonna end it there. Started on page 76, and we ended on page 86. I want to say we're like halfway there now, pretty much. Um, this was how much we read, this part of the half, and this much we have left. So I think we're halfway there, guys. We're reading 10 pages a day. We're making progress. Alrighty. That's it. That's all. I will see y'all tomorrow morning because I don't have school tomorrow and I also don't have work tomorrow, so we have no excuses. Today I was like dying. And yeah, that was it. Peace out.